does great work for Pros with Joes, where you get everyday fantasy players. They get paired up with their favorite fantasy pro. Essentially, it gets set up with a charity, and you can check that out as well. Everyday people like me, you can play with your favorite fantasy host, I guess. And you can check that out, Charity Pros and Joes. Eric also writes a Thrive article for Going for Two, and he'll tell us a little bit more about that a little bit later on. I'm also joined by my Monday Night War Room co-host. I got these a little bit around, a little bit different today. Mr. Carl Sedner, he is Mr. Full Press Coverage. He is your cheesehead for the year, pretty much. He is everything Full Press Packers. He also writes a Yahoo DFS article for Going for Two as well. Gentlemen,
hey, what's up?
How are we,
Eric? Nice to meet you, and Dan. It's Dan.
Dan.
Good to be here on the rare Wednesday afternoon preview show. I think
hopefully rare. Hopefully we don't have to deal with this every week.
Yeah, apparently it's been damn near 70 years since the last time there was a Wednesday game in the NFL. So on this momentous occasion, we'll bring a crew together like this.
This is a weird one, guys. I never thought that this would be happening on a Wednesday afternoon. I'm sure we all had other things to do today. And here we are talking about Baltimore and Pittsburgh playing this week. I thought I'd hit you guys up just to start with so we can get this out in the open with a recap of the COVID-19 fallout from this game that was meant to take place a legitimate week ago. This was meant to be the main event on Thanksgiving, and it never happened. So bear with me, and if I get anything wrong, please jump in. Ravens have players hit with COVID post-Titans game. The strength and conditioning coach got stung for not following the COVID-19 league protocols. He got fined. Apparently, he's not wearing a mask and doing this, that, and the other. Ravens have a short week. So they're playing on a Sunday afternoon, I think, if I'm not mistaken, on the road against Tennessee. I can't remember. And the Steelers have not had their bye yet as well. So we're going into the second time around. This has happened at Pittsburgh. This happened, ironically, obviously, Baltimore played Tennessee. This is happening as well when Pittsburgh played them as well. There's a little bit of commonality there. Big name players are out early, ruled in the week. J.K. Dobbins, Mark Ingram. And as the week progresses, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews are then named as out, along with James Conner. The game is moved to Sunday, then I believe Monday, and then Wednesday. All right? As more players...
They're going Tuesday. I don't think they're ever going to play Monday.
There you go. So, see, that's how confusing all this is. Sets off a chain reaction for the NFL then to move games from Thursday, week 13 on. So there's no Thursday night game. And now that's all been moved. I think there's a doubleheader on Monday and a game on Tuesday next week. All right? 21 players have been reportedly been on the COVID list since week 11 for Baltimore. That's what I've gathered over the past little bit of light research. What do you guys have to say about this to get started before we get into the game?
Yeah, it's speechless. I think first off, though, fantasy sites themselves have been kind of, okay, we're going to delay the process of when week 13 starts. I think a lot of waivers are going through on Friday. It is dependent on site, of course. Most sites have extended so that this Ravens-Steelers game is going to count for fantasy. Although, again, not every site, because there are some sites that drew that cutoff line Tuesday. So for those people, unfortunately, it's weird. I don't know if this game is counting for next week, or if they're just, well, this game's being played, but it has no fantasy implications. So it's weird in those leagues. I don't think that's happening in any leagues I'm in, so I can't actually speak to what those are, but I've heard people mention it. So I won't draw out any don't want to mess up piss off any eventual sponsors. But yeah, just the takeaway of that, the fantasy, because when first hearing about this, it's like, oh, what does this do for waivers? And I think a lot of leagues waivers processing on Friday instead, so.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the same when there were postponed games earlier in the season. It felt like a lot of the fantasy platforms out there were sort of caught flat-footed. Waivers were inadvertently run and had to be reset. Scores counted or didn't count. So this go round, it definitely feels like there's a bit more planning and it's a bit smoother. But there are a few pockets out there where it's not entirely clear where these scores land or when waivers are going to run, right? So just the buzzsaw and the chaos that is 2020 reaches into the fantasy world as well, right?
Absolutely. You can imagine this couldn't have come at a worse time for a lot of leagues as well, especially for fantasy football. You're looking at week 13. It's the last week, the last push generally before fantasy playoffs. We can get into a little bit of waiver wire talk a little bit later as well. Is there anything else? What are your guys' thoughts about what's happened? How does the NFL handle this? Just quickly, before we get in about what's going on around the game.
Yeah, it seems like it's been a real mess on the NFL side, right? I'm not one to put on the tinfoil hat and call conspiracy, but if you look at how COVID outbreaks have been handled with other teams comparatively to just how much everything is kind of broken in the favor of the Ravens this go round, it definitely seems like the cards have come up their way, right? There are players that could be activated today. It sounds like they're sitting those guys still in Dobbins and in Ingram, but looking at sort of the 3-week picture where this has impacted the schedule overall, every break has gone in the way of the Ravens thus far. So I know that there are plenty of back and forth and arguments out there as to whether or not that was happenstance or Goodell pulling the strings in the background. I'll leave that commentary for someone else, but it's been quite the buzzsaw watching this come together.
Kyle, how mad would Denver be about this?
Probably incredibly angry, but if it's their own fault, then I guess, right? If that's what it seems like that's what the NFL's putting on. This is your own fault, so you're to blame. I guess they're saying this isn't the Ravens' fault, so we will accommodate.
Yeah. So it's not the Ravens. So it's not the Ravens' fault, but Denver get to play go after practice squad a wide receiver who's had minimal work as a quarterback, but Baltimore will get an extra week.
Yeah, where's everyone's favorite NCAA term of lack of institutional control, right?
Oh.
That's touted about whenever there's a scandal in the college level. I would say if the Ravens can't keep their strength and conditioning staff compliant, then they should reap the consequences like any other team, right?
That irony definitely wasn't lost on Dan when he mentioned that on Monday. So go back to Monday night's episode if you want to hear that rant.
I don't. What rant? There's no rant. It was just
excellently detailed commentary.
Passionate conversation, I would have thought, was the term that I would have used, but that's not the point. This is the point. We're looking at the Baltimore Ravens. They're 6-4. Now, they haven't had the best run of late, and at times they look really ordinary, while Pittsburgh at 10-0, they're hard to gauge because they're putting teams away. They have been disrupted as much as anyone this year. I think it's an absolute credit to them and the organization for being able to navigate around. This is a bitter rivalry. What do we feel is going to happen today? Do you feel the players are going to come out? I don't like ever saying the players won't be motivated to play, but if you've ever seen the Jets or the Cowboys play this year, then you probably understand. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get mine today, Cole. Don't worry. I'm here on a Wednesday. I haven't started on Taysom Hill or the Eagles yet. It's coming. But if you're the Steelers and you're looking at the Ravens across the aisle from you right now, how much are you willing to stick it to them this week?
Yeah, that's directed at any of us. You got to think. Right now, you got to imagine the Steelers, especially realizing strategically how important it is to get as many wins as possible. The Chiefs are at 1 loss, and it doesn't look like they're going to get very many more, if none. So they may need to go 16-0 to guarantee a 1 seed and guarantee that bye. Which I guess if you're the Steelers, you're basically saying, well, if they're kind of playing it around like this to avoid having that 8 team, then we need to play hard for that 1 seed because there won't be an 8 seed in each conference, so you will have that first round bye. So they probably are, but I think if credit to Tomlin being one of the best coaches in the league, I think he's probably focusing on that, understanding the bigger picture of we're after the first round bye, which means we need to win every game. We need to basically act like every game is a playoff game, and that will set them up well for the playoffs too. So great job to Tomlin on that, and we'll see if that continues.
Yeah, I think that's really the key point to keep in mind, right? There's never a lack of motivation in these division rivalry games, especially this pairing in particular. They're always big games. There's always hard hits in there. So I think the players themselves maintain that motivation, but just strategically, right? There's there's only one team that gets a bye this year. So the margin for error for the Steelers is narrow. They've got a game on second place. So I expect the motivation to be high and for them to come out and really try to make a statement, at least in my estimation, getting up early and then, leaning on that stout defense to maintain their lead.
All right. We're looking at James Conner that's out this week, Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson, and I know this is going to sound like a bit of a weird one to kind of bring up, but Willie Snead is also out. I didn't even know he was out. I was looking for player props and everything for him today. Nothing, because the last time when they played, Willie Snead had over 100 yards. No one really looks at Willie Snead like there's some weird ones if you go back and see who played in this game last time. Gus Edwards had over 80-odd yards as well. Mm-hmm. Baltimore had over 260 rushing yards on the Steelers. J.K. Dobbins had about 130.
I don't think Ingram played, so Dobbins and Edwards both I think combined for, probably close to
267
of those.
Yeah, so Jackson had about 60-odd, Edwards had 80-odd, and J.K. Dobbins had over 110. So this is a team, the Steelers, who have one of the best run defenses in the league, had 260-odd rushing yards put on them by Baltimore, who are now without two of their best running backs and their quarterback. Everyone seems to be on Gus Edwards this week. How do you guys feel about him?
Yeah, I think Gus Edwards is definitely going to be in that more kind of featured or predominant role. I would expect a pretty significant split between Edwards and Justice Hill, but with kind of the between the 20s and early down work going to Gus Edwards. So if you're looking for a floor play, if you're looking for pretty consistent volume, I would lean on the side of Edwards. I'm kind of a closet Justice Hill truther, so I think as he gets more and more opportunity today, he's really going to make the most of it, and he'll probably have some of the kind of flashier efficiency stats that we all like to chase down. But in terms of who's getting the most opportunity, it's definitely Edwards in my book.
Kyle
no closet here.
No,
it's because I love Hill so much. There's nothing closet about it. I drafted him in the first round of a rookie draft.
Didn't we all?
Oh, okay, that was the thing. I thought I was crazy for doing that, because every time I talk about that, Hill in the first, you're insane. So
how high did you take him?
This is the Hill crew.
I could go with this. I went 107 on him.
Yeah, higher than me. I think I did 110.
Yeah, I wasn't wasting time. Yeah, I didn't care.
I had him as the clear RB4 in that class.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get his chance at this point now, isn't he? But then again, you've got someone like Robert Griffin III, who's going to come in and play I don't want to say the Lamar Jackson role, because what that kid's been able to do, especially last year, has been nothing short of exceptional. Although we did see something like this from Robert Griffin in 2012. So what sort of success do you feel like Robert Griffin can have? Let's start with Eric. What sort of success do you think he's going to have today against Pittsburgh?
Limited, maybe. So, I mean, the offense that they run there in Baltimore obviously is catered to quarterbacks that have a skill set similar to what we've known Robert Griffin III to have. But those days are far removed, right? So I don't think that we're going to see this kind of turnkey, plug and play replacement with Lamar Jackson, even at the sort of abbreviated level that he's been contributing this year, right? I'm expecting to see a pretty good amount of pistol sets and a lot of RPO. You mentioned Willie Snead earlier. That's, at least in my estimation, with Robert Griffin in there, that's probably one of the biggest impacts to this Ravens roster overall, right? With the RPO, with those pistol sets, you're going to see a lot of quick throws, a lot of slants, a lot of underneath work, and that is where Willie Snead eats. So without him out there, they're really left with options out of the backfield and a bunch of burners, which we're not entirely sure that Robert Griffin has the arm to get to. So I think most of his work is going to be done on the ground and in the short game. But I don't think he's going to have much to write home about in terms of his performance on field today.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar thinking that this Steelers defense is incredibly difficult at really every level, whether it's running or passing. Wide receiver producing against them this year, but I don't know, that's weak. Between Marquise Brown, Des Bryant, Miles Boykin, who's going to lead the Ravens in targets? That's going to be an interesting way to think of it. Maybe it ends up being Des Bryant. Maybe just that, contested catch ability that he once showed is it. Maybe Griffin his ability one showed. Maybe both of those players gambling to perform up to those standards. Maybe they both kind of recognize that in each other, and there's a connection there between Griffin and Bryant. But this is pure narrative street because it's probably going to be Marquise Brown. As Eric mentioned, Bernard, dude's so fast, but he can win underneath. Does the Ravens use him enough that way? Maybe, maybe not, and maybe they don't have a choice. But today,
yeah, I mean, I also thought someone like Devin Duvernay would be that guy. He's extremely quick. He's got really good hands. Same with James Proche. He had one of the highest completion percentage or catch completion percentages coming out of college last year, right, from SMU. So Proche could be also that guy who's very safe hands that could look for that in that inside role at least. Baltimore have only allowed 5 passing touchdowns this year. That's crazy.
Baltimore have allowed.
Baltimore, 5. And in 2 of those, they came from Pittsburgh and Chase Claypool and Eric Ebron. Now, James Conner's out. That leaves us with Benny Snell, probably Anthony McFarlane. Do you see Baltimore leaning on the run, or do you think they're just going to start slinging it about? Because it seems like it snowed overnight. It seems cold, and it seems like there's a little bit of wind.
Sorry, Baltimore or Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, they'll probably sling it. The way Ben's been playing this year, I think they have full confidence in him. And, when they get close to the red zone, you'll probably see more Benny Snell. But I get the sense this could be a big attempt game for Ben. And once they're up in the lead, they'll maybe run more, but especially first half.
Yeah, I would agree with that, at least in part. I expect Baltimore, or rather Pittsburgh, to come out and really try to make a statement and get out early or to an early lead. And that's largely going to be delivered through the passing attack. The only thing that I would sort of disagree with, and it's actually a bit of a recently broken piece of news, is that their center Pouncey is out for today's game. And so with the weather, with a replacement center in there, I expect Ben to be under center much more. Right? They don't want a backup center trying to make those shotgun snaps and potentially mishandle it or misfire it. And specifically with the Pittsburgh Steelers, when they're under center, they run the ball. 87% of snaps that Big Ben has taken from under center have resulted in a run. So I think the weather, I think the fact that they're going to be up early and big, and the fact that they have this, that they have their backup center snapping the ball to Big Ben is going to have him under the center more often. And at least thus far in the season, that's resulted in a heavy workload on the run side.
Last time they played, less than 50 rushing yards from a Steelers running back. That was James Conner. He had less than 50 the last time they met. They didn't seem out of control in that game that much. I believe they had a couple turnovers. Maybe they went for a touchdown. I feel like Lamar had maybe a fumble, went for a touchdown as well. Might have been an intercept as well. We're talking about a center that's ruled out. Him and Ben have obviously had an incredible relationship for some time now. And they didn't really run the ball on Baltimore last time. Tell me, who do we feel is going to have the bigger impact this week, McFarlane or Snell?
Yeah, I'll go with Snell. Just given the data points that we have on him, right? He has been able to show a little bit of pop when he's gotten the ball. As the season has gone on, even with Conner's healthy, he's still getting more and more workload incrementally week over week. So it looks like the confidence in him as a player, it looks like his understanding of the offense has been increasing, and now he's got the door wide open for him, right? So I really expect him to seize on that opportunity. Your point about the game a few weeks ago is perfectly fair, right? I think it's fair to characterize the run as being stuffed in that game, but that also wasn't a game where it was essentially Baltimore's practice squad out there, which is what we're going to see today. So Pouncey going out is very much so a big loss for that offensive line, but I do think that relative to all of the injuries and all of the losses that Baltimore has faced on the defensive side of the ball, that the running game is going to be more effective in today's outing.
Yeah.
I do wonder if McFarlane actually ends up touching Snell. But if you're asking me who would I rather start in fantasy, I'm going to say Snell because of the goal line opportunities. Already this year, he's had 6 carries from inside the 5. James Conner's had 9. So it's not as if Conner's had that much more than him. It's a role that he's kind of already had already. So certainly expect him to be heavily involved in the red zone. I mean, McFarlane doesn't even have a single touch in the red zone. Snell's 9 red zone carries, that ties him for 4th on the team. The only players with more red zone opportunities this year are Conner, Juju, and Claypool. So I think he maintains that role. And then the addition of getting more carries and a more solid workload. Kind of expect maybe Mcfarlane's going to be the pass catcher. I think that was kind of the role they maybe envisioned of him at some point. Any news about Jalen Samuels? Is he injured? Or I know he's been inactive for a lot of games, but I think that's more healthy scratch than anything.
He's been out for a while. He's been out for some time. It feels like he hasn't been a part of their plans going for a while.
But now I wonder.
Yeah.
Is that just because Connor with Connor out, does he suddenly get active now? Like that's what I'm wondering. And even then,
I haven't seen any news on him. I won't lie to you. I can't say if I haven't seen him pop up in anything. So I don't know. Eric, have you seen anything about Jalen Samuel's worth of note?
No, I haven't. At least nothing that would indicate his status changing from the prior weeks where he was out. So unless there's something late breaking, I don't think he's going to be involved in today's game. But I don't think any of the three of us are here to break news. So go to the sources that you trust and make sure that he is in fact ruled out before we kick off here in a few minutes.
That is 100% the right answer. None of us are here to break any news for you.
Yeah, so listen, I am not a lawyer. I just play one on TV, right?
There we go. Well, that's pretty cool too. Kyle and I, we're lucky to have Dr. James Ferretti with us on Monday nights. And a week or so ago, we saw an injury that occurred to Juju Smith-Schuster, which was kind of comical the way it happened. We haven't really seen much from him since. What do we feel like, Juju? Do we feel like he's going to be sent out there to do his thing? I haven't seen anything about it. He seems good to go. It seems like one of those things that kind of happened and that didn't. How much do you trust him knowing that's in the back of your mind this week? Because he was their best receiver the last time they met.
Yeah, at least in terms of the triplets there in Pittsburgh, he's the one that I'm certainly fading the most, right? And I think it's just a matter of necessity, right? He is not on the injury report this week. Okay. Jalen Samuels is in fact ruled out per the Steelers.com. So Juju comes in without a designation. But with that, I mean, if he is even a little bit tender with that injury last week, why risk that in a game that they at least project to be pretty handily in control of, right? So I think he'll be out there. I think his workload will be relatively similar in terms of the number of snaps that he sees, but I don't think he's going to see the target volume that we really need from him in order for him to contribute in a meaningful way in fantasy. So he specifically is the Pittsburgh wideout that I'm fading of the trio.
And again, that's crazy to think about, considering Baltimore have been really stingy on wide receivers this year. Yeah. One of their it was the running joke, Eric, for our Monday crew for some time, where I would ask the same question every week, and I'd like to get your take on this. Kyle knows what's coming. Who do you want out of this Pittsburgh trio? Do you want Claypool, Johnson, or Juju Smith-Schuster? If you had to keep one, cut one, and trade one, what would you do? Because this was
dynasty.
Yeah, in dynasty.
It's dynasty. That's part of the key.
This is something we did every week for about a month because it changed who was going off every week, and everyone would tilt every week. So I'd like to know from you. Keep one, cut one, trade one.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to keep Claypool, at least specifically in the context of dynasty, right? I think that he is another in that long lineage of Pittsburgh success drafting there. And he's just so young, right? You can bank on further development, further growth and advancement in his understanding of the game. I'm probably going to trade Deontay Johnson, largely to do with the market there, right? The Deontay Johnson fans are rabid, so I think I'd probably get the best return on trying to move him. And Juju, by process elimination, is hitting the curb, right? If nothing else, and actually for the article I'm writing for Go for Two now, looking at some of the free agents for next year, I'm not entirely certain that Juju is back in Pittsburgh next year. They very clearly have viable options, even if he's not there. They also have a very long history of being able to scout and develop wide receivers very, very well. So I don't know if Pittsburgh is going to be keen in that conservative front office to pay the type of salary that Juju is going to look for on the open market. Oddly enough, I think that might actually benefit him in the future. Getting into a position where there may be less mouths to feed, but that uncertainty, especially in a dynasty format, is something that I try to fade. I chase down those known variables, right? So Juju is hitting the curb for me.
Wow. And Kyle, any changes?
Yeah, I think at this point it's that same order. cut Juju, keep Claypool, trade Johnson. I know, Dan, you're on team trade Claypool pretty much the whole time. You were pretty consistent with that.
Yeah, I kind of
just
feel
to
like
sell
it's
the hype.
Yeah, I can sell hype. Johnson, I feel like underrated. I feel like the way he gets targeted, I was going through it today. This guy is he's a target hog. And I feel like if you ask me this question again in 2 years' time, Johnson will still be a Steeler instead of being the guy that might be let go. So I feel like you can trade Claypool's, upside, I think, pretty easily. I don't think you need to convince anyone, because when you see him have those big games, he has big games, but his yard total isn't really much. It's very touchdown driven. So for me, I'm going to take that continual upside from Johnson. And, I understand he's had a little bit of an injury struggles this year. I kind of feel like that's with everyone, though, this year. I don't know. It was all a lot of that. That seemed to happen a lot at the start of the year. So I kind of put that beside and go forward with Johnson. I still think Juju, it's crazy because he's been really well of late. And that's why it's such an intriguing thing, because this trio I remember going back a few years, it was the LA Rams when they had Kupp, Cooks, and Wood. And we were talking about that then, and obviously it's panned out the way it has with Cooks leaving, but we can talk about this with Pittsburgh all day. It's insane.
Yeah, it's wild. And I think a lot of it boils down to the question, right? In terms of who I like most in Pittsburgh, I'm actually with you on the Deontay bandwagon. I've kind of got a short list of guys in the receiving core that I start all of my cash game builds with, and Deontay Johnson is one of them, largely on the back of that volume, right? So he probably has the trust factor if the question were sort of posed that way, but I do think that the Deontay Johnson diehards are a bit more willing to put some return on the line relative to Claypool. So if I'm trading one, I think he gets the best bang for my buck.
And what we saw last year with Johnson is he was producing with Mason Rudolph and with Delvin Hodges, certainly much better than Juju was. So it does seem maybe to be able to work with a lesser quarterback, which is a concern. I mean, Claypool's doing great right now, but what happens when Big Ben's not throwing the football? Which is almost my point of maybe Juju actually is the best value because he gets to leave and not go through, once Ben's gone, a pretty, we don't know what that quarterback situation is going to be look like. And the way the Steelers are cash strapped, it seems, and including letting Juju go, I guess once Ben's gone, that's a lot of money off the book. But are they going to be able to afford free agents, or are they going to have to draft, develop, and restart that whole cycle again? And how painful is that going to be? And if Juju goes with an established quarterback somewhere, he might actually get the value. But it does seem like with Smith-Schuster, he needs those alpha targets to draw away. You
get me Juju Smith-Schuster. You get me Juju Smith-Schuster down in Houston. You do that for me. Get me that all day. Give me some of that.
That would be awesome. And now that Bill O'Brien's not there, maybe they'll actually start, managing their team in a reasonable fashion. So he certainly could end up there. He could also chase the money and end up on Jets or somewhere else, right? So I do think that leaving town will probably help his prospects going forward, but there is some uncertainty and some outcome on the range where he goes and gets the biggest payday and plays for kind of a bottom 7 team, and it hurts his production. So the uncertainty is something that I typically run and hide from.
So Juju Smith-Schuster is extremely young, right? He's younger than what he should be. If I told you Juju Smith-Schuster was going to be a Miami Dolphin next year, how would you feel about that?
Great, actually. I like that quarterback situation.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Sounds like a good spot. I think we're about 20 minutes from kickoff, right? So I think we should get on into the main event for today. Wednesday night football. I had it down as Tuesday. That's embarrassing. The 6-4 Baltimore Ravens at the 10-0 Pittsburgh Steelers. Today's show is sponsored by Thrive Fantasy. Shout out to Thrive. Fantastic. I've been checking that out. It's kind of amazing. For those who haven't used it, Thrive is where prop betting meets DFS. It's a fantastic way to crossbreed your gaming experience. For those who sign up, use the promo code Armchair and receive an instant matchup up to $50 minimum deposit for $20. And that's thrivefantasy.com. It is awesome. So for those who like to play DFS and build lineups, and for those who like to, obviously with props, overs and unders and whatnot, it is an incredible way to kind of build a lineup. I was kind of blown away by that. I thought it was pretty cool. Has anyone got anything to say about Thrive? Anybody used that before? I know Eric might have had some experience with it.
Yeah. So I actually I'm writing a weekly article for Going for Two starting this week on some of my favorite plays in Thrive. So
Yes,
definitely
very
keep
good.
an eye out for that. And it's a really interesting platform, right? I'm a huge advocate for us as fantasy players to really take advantage of the prop market, just
Yep.
because the amount of analysis and research that we do, really does give us an edge with prop bets. So when we first heard about Thrive and this, sort of DFS meets prop bets kind of makeup, it really struck a chord with me. I've been in there building lineups, and one of the things that I've really come to appreciate is that the way the market fluctuates within prop bets, it can be a little wild, largely impacting what the pay line might look like. But in Thrive, because you're building that roster of prop bets, it's far more stable, right? So there are a few pockets where there could be a late injury. Let's say center for the Steelers gets hurt day of the game, right, or gets put on the COVID list. You're not going to find that wild swing in the line within Thrive. So it does open up some pockets if you're really keeping a keen eye on the injury report and on the news, where there are some soft bets in there, and you can very much so find yourself with a winning lineup if you're keeping an ear to the ground.
Yeah,
So check it out, thrivefantasy.com, promo code armchair to get a match on your first deposit up to $50.
yeah, it's fantastic. So we're going to get into a couple of these Thrive lines because I find it kind of incredible that we look at it like that. And I'm with you on this. I find that I look at more lines and props as such, and it helps me build whatever lineup I have, whether it's DFS or weekly. I find it's the way to go because if I know if that's what they're looking at, then I'm in the ballpark of what's going to happen, and that just helps me make a better educated guess. Tell me, guys, Big Ben, 271.5 passing yards. How do you feel about that? Over or under?
I'm going with the under here. It feels like this line hasn't moved appropriately relative to what this matchup looks like. So had this been a regular Steelers Ravens matchup or Steelers against any starting NFL team, I think that's a pretty sharp line. But like I was saying before, I expect the Steelers to get out big and get out to that big lead relatively early. So he'll be tracking well to that number in the first quarter and a half. But once they're in control, I think that they're going to really cruise through, lean on the running game, lean on that defense, and look to week 13. So I'll go with the under at Ben on 271 and a half.
I first saw it and was like, okay, no, that's certainly attainable. But then, as Eric mentioned, with the Pouncey being out, definitely bounces him down, I think. So, 271? Yeah, 271 and a half. They might, especially because of who's the next quarterback listed, Robert Griffin III, not Lamar Jackson. This may be
Listen,
more of a blow than expected.
RG3 can throw one. We know this.
That's
He's
true.
been deep before, and Pittsburgh have been exposed by wide receivers this year a little bit. Like you would have thought that they were a bit more stout at that department, but RG3 168.5. How do we feel? No Mark Andrews, no Willie Snead, no Mark Ingram, no J.K. Dobbins.
That's such a low total for a quarterback that you feel like you have to, right? But it's like, and you just mentioned it, that the lack of options, it makes it scary to say the over on that, really.
Starting quarterback Taysom Hill had 3 passing yards at halftime this weekend, so maybe it's not low enough.
Yeah, so go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Griffin's proven a bit more in his career than Taysom Hill. I know it's been a while, but he's started a lot more games and thrown a lot more passes than Taysom Hill. So it's a little disparaging there.
Yeah. There's going to be a defamation case coming our way for making that comp, right? I mean, at least for me, I'm probably going to be sweating this one till the very last minute, but I'm going the over on this line, right? It's just so low. And following the game script that I've been talking about this entire time, it's going to call for more passing attempts from the Ravens. And while I'm not particularly confident in his ability to get the ball downfield, the weather does play into this a little bit, right? He's got some absolute burners on the team. At least in my estimation, snow, rain, slippery surfaces tend to benefit the offense. Yeah. So just one misstep from a corner, from a DB, and all of a sudden Duvernay could be taking 180 yards, right? So the number is just so low. I do think that his attempt line is going to be pretty high, right? So he's going to be throwing the ball just because they're projected to be down by so much. So he's got to hit on one or two of those, and he's right at that number. So it makes my stomach turn to have that. But I do think over on 168.5 is where I'll be in Thrive today.
For sure. Now we're looking at rushing as well, and it hadn't adapted so much because for the most part, Dobbins and Ingram were half in, half out. Gus Edwards is at 38.5 rushing yards. Now I know how hard Pittsburgh are to break down in that department, but 38.5 rushing yards for Gus Edwards seems pretty light considering he had over 80 the last 87 rush yards in week 8.
Yeah,
that seems like a lot, right?
Less than half, probably getting more workload. The only weakness is maybe the Steelers are more focused on the run, knowing that, okay, it's Griffin back there. But I guess the way Jackson's been passing this year, maybe not. Maybe they are. Maybe this is the better threat of pass. Sorry, if that disparages Lamar Jackson. We really don't like the Ravens today, do we? But yeah, Gus Edwards, I think that's smash that over because, 38? 38.5. That's still, I still couldn't believe it. I had to go check again.
that might have changed, but the last time I looked, 38.5. That was earlier today. So,
this is actually one of those spots that I was talking about, right? There was uncertainty in the market with whether or not Dobbins and Ingram were going to be back. And here in Thrive is this juicy line at 38.5. So this is absolutely one of the lock spots for me this week. Yeah. If you check out the props market, largely his line is between 57.5 and 58.5 following the betting lines, right? So, everything that we've seen from his prior performance with the volume that we're expecting to get, I think he's going to be in that 12 to 16 touch minimum kind of floor. So, the 38.5, it almost makes me wish that I could, tease up that line quite a bit. Right. But if nothing else, take it for the win that it is, move on and definitely in my Thrive lineup for today's showdown.
Benny Snell at 58.5. I feel like I'd lean under there, to be honest with you. I feel like if they're going to throw it, I kind of feel like that's him out. I think 58.5 might be a bit high for me.
So looking at the line, I would tend to agree, right? When we were talking about this yesterday and kind of prior to the show, very much so I was leaning towards the under there. But that Pouncey news is really influenced the way that I'm looking at this game, right? They very much so could and likely would change their game plan with a new center snapping the ball. But if nothing else, I expect the amount of time that Ben spends under center to be significantly higher. And at least in the 11 weeks prior, that's meant a significantly higher proportion of running. So I'll actually go on the over with Snell at 58.5.
Yeah, this is a tough line too. I don't really feel confident in any of the quarterbacks or Snell here because it so easily could go over. So you really don't want to be picking the unders. I think it kind of addresses a bit Monday. It psychologically feels better just taking over on everything. Like when you're going to take bets, take the ones that you think over because if you take the under, all it takes is one play and you're ruined. Whereas you've got the whole game to make up for that over. So I don't know if that really makes a difference, but it does psychologically. So go with that. But I guess the thing with Snell is he could have, again, this, if it was over under on fantasy points, I'd, unless it was astronomical, I'd probably take high because I think, again, short yardage goal line situations where he could have success but not accumulate yards. That's kind of the hesitation to take the over here. Especially, again, maybe it's just the comparison of seeing Gus Edwards 20 yards less. Yeah. I think we all think Edwards, if we had Edwards at 58.5, we'd probably all still say over there.
Yeah.
So I think we all expect Edwards to outproduce Snell, and maybe just seeing it in reverse is okay. Go after Gus, that's it, and ignore the rest. And I guess maybe that's kind of the way I feel about it more. Sorry, listeners, if you wanted a more clear answer.
Yeah.
No, I tend to agree. That perception's there. If the roles were, at least if Edwards was up around that 50-60 mark, you'd still feel pretty confident because Baltimore don't have much going for them. They could run him into a brick wall, and all they have to do is break.
They can always run. So that's the one thing about that team. They can always run. So I don't really feel confident in Snell, but I definitely feel confident about some of these receiver lines for the Steelers.
I'm checking out the receiving lines here, and everyone is above 50. So we'll get to Ebron in a minute, and nobody is above 40 for the Ravens. So we're looking at Claypool 50.5, Deontay Johnson 57.5, Juju Smith-Schuster 51.5. What do we like with overs and unders here? Because I could see all of them having like 45, 48, and I could see all of them going for 65. That's the problem. And I don't see them running it that well. So I don't know. How do
I
you
like
guys feel?
Claypool because he's the lowest. Maybe it's overly simplifying it, but if I would have imagined he would have had the highest line, to be honest, at least closer to Johnson. Would expect Juju to have the lowest. So the fact that Claypool's the lowest, that kind of tells me go after that 50.5 line for Juju, for Claypool.
Yeah, if I'm picking one, I'm right there with Kyle. I'm going with Claypool. But on their face, honestly, I kind of like the over on all of them, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned not having a ton of confidence in Juju's role today. So of the three, that would be the one that I would look at the under. But really, the circumstance by which we're playing this game, the amount of defensive starters that are missing. Generally speaking, whenever a player is injured or now on the COVID list, I typically tend to go over on the yardage for who they would be defending, because an arm tackle, getting out of placement, not positioning their body right while the ball's in the air, all of those things can turn a 15-yard reception into 40 or 50 yards, right? So I think it's a bit of an efficacy play as well, right? With my projection of the Steelers getting up big, I do think that's going to be through the air predominantly. So with that and a couple of missed tackles, a couple of bad placements, I do like the over for Claypool and Johnson at 50.5 and 57.5 respectively.
So along those lines, we were talking about Kyle. You were just mentioning you wanted the guy with the lowest yardage to go over. That was Chase Claypool. Baltimore's kind of sad. This is kind of sad. This is a sad face here. Marquise Brown, 38.5, and his form of late over the past 5 weeks has been absolutely atrocious. Des Bryant, 28.5. Devin Duvernay, 23.5. Do you take the same theory of I'm going to take the guy with the lowest total and go over? Or do you feel like this is something where Marquise Brown, his form has been so bad, but he could break one off? How do you guys feel about this one for Baltimore?
Yeah, so basically, it kind of goes back to the question I posed earlier, right? Who's going to have a defender slip and leave them open?
Yep.
So of the three, I would look at Duvernay if I had to pick one. Again, with that low line and just the sort of quick burst speed and short area range that he's shown before. The other thing with Duvernay is that little by little they've been finding ways to get the ball into his hands. Right, he's been more involved. Returning kicks. He's been seeing more and more snaps and more routes throughout the last 4 weeks. So I do think that the offense wants to see what they have in Duvernay, and this is a prime opportunity. So, at 23.5 yards, I mean, that's 2 receptions, maybe 1, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that the Ravens are going to be throwing a fair amount. I do think that the coaching staff and the front office are interested to see in what they have in Devin Duvernay. So I would actually lock in on his over for 23.5 of those 3.
And with Snead out, I mean, Duvernay could see a lot of time in the slot. I know theoretically Marquise Brown could go there too. But if I remember correctly, didn't Pierre Garçon lead the league in receptions primarily from the slot with Griffin as his quarterback? I don't know if Griffin was fully healthy.
Yeah, it would have been who with Djax, right? We're going back then when Shanahan was there. That was what, 2012?
Yeah, I think so, 2013 maybe. I don't think it was Griffin's rookie year, but I think it might have been the next year.
Yeah, Garçon had that ridiculous season. I remember. Yeah.
So, he did. I tend to think that Des Bryant kind of fits that profile a little more, but he's just such a big unknown, right? It's his first game being activated.
Sorry to cut you off. We're also talking about Mark Andrews being out as well. I mean, do you feel like this is a chance to get Des Bryant inside a little bit more?
Play him as a tight end?
Yeah.
Maybe. And I mean, the way they use Mark Andrews, they extended wide receiver anyway. I was going to say, you asked, okay, do you go for the highest in Brown or the lowest in Duvernay? I was actually going to say the guy in the middle, Des Bryant, just because he's not that much higher than Duvernay, 28.5 to 23. I really like both of them, to be honest. Eric made a really good point about Duvernay, so I think the fact that both of them are under 30 yards, I'd go for either of them.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, it's just so nerve-wracking to take the over on a player who hasn't seen the field, not only this year, but in a number of years, right?
He played last week. He had like 1 or 2 catches. Maybe one catch.
That's right, yeah.
But I mean, you're as close to right as you can get. Where's he been?
I think he was active like 2 or 3 weeks ago as well, but I don't think he saw the field at all. He was just kind of on the sideline there. So,
Before we go any further, I want to say we're going to get into kickers because this is going for 2 and Jeff's going to have a fit. So I put this one in here. Eric, for those who don't know, our fearless leader Jeff Lambert, he isn't the biggest fan of kickers. They aren't really people apparently. I
Check out
didn't
the Going for Two shop for banned kickers shirts.
Banned kickers. He's got some really weird sort of thing going against kickers. But I noticed on Thrive, Chris Boswell over 7.5 points. That's interesting because this could be
two field goals, 2-point afters.
This is field goal city with these conditions, right? I mean, the wind is
no center. Maybe they're not getting into that push into the red zone. A lot of field goals. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
there. Yeah, I'm right there on the over as well. Right, I've got the Steelers winning 26-13 today to jump ahead a little bit. So quick math, he's right over 7.5 following that. And to your point, Kyle, their red zone efficiency could see a walk back with Pouncey out. So a couple of those touchdowns could easily become field goals. And all of a sudden, Boswell is smashing that line.
Yeah. And I mean, even if it's one field goal, he gets 4-point afters, or I guess he'd need 5. But if they're scoring that many touchdowns, then maybe he could get that. So, to be safe, you probably need him to get 2 field goals, but you could theoretically do it with 1 just because of those weapons and the quarterback. Now,
this game has moved. The needle has moved a little bit. I've just seen it's come up from 40 to 42. 42, it's come down from 42.5. Sorry, the Ravens have come up from 10.5 to 12.
They were 10.5. That is so low. I mean, you almost feel like you have to take that. They're gonna just put up 10, aren't they, and really mess that up? But man, I take that. I mean, what did you say, Eric? You said 26-13?
Yeah, I'm right there. I mean, now I'm sweating it more, right? As the betting market has adjusted to what I had. But still, I've got Pittsburgh by 13, 26-13 today.
So this is where Baltimore are going to run it down, hit that 2-point conversion, and get you. This is happening.
Yeah,
they're going full Philly on you.
I smell such a terrible beat coming here in the last few minutes of today's game.
Oh man. There were some interesting ones there. I saw a few things that I kind of liked. I like to touch on these as well. Steelers at halftime, over under 21. How do you feel? Steelers at -6.5.
Okay, so, yeah, and the over under for the whole game 21
at halftime. Yeah,
that it is one because my original theory was, okay, are they going to pass a lot first and then try and run it down, slow it down, so that that would go for sure on that over. But now I wonder, maybe is it that something where they're, like Eric says, they start under center a lot, they start running, and then as the end of the game goes, maybe as the center gets more comfortable, they could start doing more passing. So I'm actually maybe more tempted to go the under for the halftime.
Yeah, I'll stick with my line here. I think that Pittsburgh gets up early, so I'll lay the 6.5 and go over 21, but just barely. I wouldn't expect there to be a whole lot of second half action. So that 39 points that I'm projecting for the entire game, I think the majority of it is going to come in the first half, and with a lot of ground action and defense working in the second.
And I'm going to go the complete opposite of both of you. I'm going to say under 21, but I'm going to take Steelers over 6.5. And I'll tell you why. I feel like Baltimore's going to absolutely look atrocious that first half, and Pittsburgh are just going to dice them up. I think this is going to be over by halftime. They could be up 17. They could be up by 17 at halftime, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Baltimore not even off the mark. So that's where I'm at with this. So I feel fairly comfortable with taking the Steelers -6.5 and under 21 because I could see both happening pretty easily. You're hoping that Gus Edwards can get it done. You're hoping that Marquise Brown finds form. You're hoping that RG3 can nail like getting to one of his players. He hasn't done that in quite some time. I could see them making adjustments at halftime and maybe getting some points on the back end. But I feel like the Steelers at -6.5 under 21s is there for the taking. I'll tell you what I did find interesting. RG3 rush yards, 29.5.
So I'm tempted to lean on the under here. At least on its face, it feels like a pretty sharp line. So I would probably just walk away from this one entirely. I do think that they're going to try to open things up and get the offense moving by putting the ball in his hand and letting him find some reads and pick his spots to run. But I also expect the Pittsburgh front to largely be waiting for that, right? So it should be a pretty close line. If I had to pick one, I would probably go on the under because I think that the ground option is going to be pretty quickly abandoned in this one. But if I had my choice, I would just walk away entirely.
And just to think back to Monday night, like Dan, remember we were talking about Carson Wentz at 13 rushing yards, 13 and a half, I think it was.
Smash.
Oh yeah, that's
Smash.
right?
Smash.
Now you're talking more than double that.
Yeah.
That is pretty scary. I guess the one good news is,
sorry, with that, we should add, we love it. We love a quarterback that's going to panic. So the rush yard for quarterbacks that panicking is something. It's a thing of beauty. And believe me, like a Giants fan over here watching Daniel Jones run, half the time it's because he's out of his mind. He's scared. So I
he's hamstrung, you could say.
He's hamstrung. Yeah, well, very very good.
Sorry,
he's pulled his heartstrings. How about that one? Yeah. You know, it's one of those things. I like a quarterback that panics and runs. I love them. They're great for fantasy. And I can see RG3 looking up and going, "Oh no," and bang, go. And he's going to do that enough, I think. But sorry to interrupt you, Kyle. You can keep going.
I think so there's good news and bad news for RG3. The good news is this offense is designed that way anyway. So, like, they're naturally going to expect that. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's the reason they brought him in, right? Is that if ever Jackson goes out, they can continue to maintain this offense that has won them so many games. So you got to think they're going to design him enough runs to maybe get that volume-wise. Maybe not quite what you can trust from the running back getting volume, for instance. But the bad news is that the Steelers have been preparing for the Ravens to be a running quarterback and have that action. So they're not going to be thrown off guard by suddenly that change happening. So I guess there's good and bad news. So I'm kind of like Eric, where I'd rather ignore it. But I think, unlike Eric, I think I'd be tempted to go with the over more than the under. I like the next line though, Anthony Mcfarlane. Unless I'm jumping.
Yeah, it was funny. There were a couple back end props that I was looking at. Obviously, with Thrive, they nail like the majority, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to look for some outside guys as well, and that's why I thought RG3 rush was interesting. Anthony Mcfarlane, 30.5 rush and 8.5 receiving yards.
I like the receiving especially.
8.5. Yeah. That's one at worst 2 catches for Mcfarlane. And he's going to be
no Jalen Samuels, no James Conner. How many career receptions does Benny Snell have? Right, like that. Yeah, I agree. That's one of my favorite lines that we've talked about all episode. Really, probably the only one I like more. Maybe the Gus Edwards rush yards. Sorry, Eric.
No, I was just going to button up the Anthony McFarlane line. You know, if we're just talking about his receiving yards, smashing the over at 8.5. I mean, I would even flirt with that as a combined number, 39 total, and largely with that coming through the air out of the backfield, right? So this is one of those spots I would lock in on Thrive.
It's too good to ignore, isn't it? And a couple of receivers that I was looking at as well. We were talking before about Pittsburgh with Thrive, and it was over the 50s for the big three, but James Washington at 11.5. All he needs is one catch, right? He needs one catch. And that's going to be that can be 35 yards to the house, 40 yards to the house with Washington. That's always there. So I thought 11.5 yards for him receiving. I don't know. I kind of thought that might be something that they exploit. I don't think that's a bad play at all.
Especially if Juju's out early, right? Like they may say, okay, we're up by enough. We don't want to risk him further. We'll pull him out of the game. Not that he necessarily aggravates anything, but just to risk that, suddenly Washington's on the field more often. So yeah. I mean, like that.
I saw Ray McLeod in there. I think he was like an 8.5 as well. I thought, wow, that's if Juju's not going and Ray McLeod's there, wow, that's an outsider. Yeah, that's all it takes is one. Yeah, well, you know it's going to be a rushing attempt.
But you're going for 2, of course. But yeah,
that's it. Wow. And I also saw Miles Boykin. Eric, what do you think about Miles Boykin at 10.5?
Yeah, so this is actually one of my favorite spots on the entire slate for today, right? To our point a moment ago, it's one reception, and Boykin to this point hadn't seen a whole lot of run on the field, but now he's one of their sort of short list of options, and he is averaging just under 11 yards per catch. So anytime that I find myself with a player who their prop is right at their single reception average, and we're expecting them to see more time on the field, that's a spot where I'm going over. So that one's locked in for me as well.
So
I did just look up. Sorry, Dan, for receptions.
Please.
So technically, Benny Snell does have more career receptions than Anthony McFarlane. He has 5 though in like two and a half seasons of NFL football. That's not a lot. McFarlane only has four this year, but he's barely also seen the field. So yeah, I think looking at that again, I think he's got to be out there catching passes. He has to. He's got to catch one. 8.5 is a smash. But just I think all three of those guys, Mcfarlane 8.5, Washington 11.5, Boykin 10.5. It's the same principle. If you think any of them are going to catch 2 passes, you've got it.
So the game has started, for what it's worth, while I have you guys with me right now. RG3 went, I think it looks like he went 3 and out. He went 2 for 2 for 4 yards. Gus Edwards he has 1 yard rushing. He went to Marquise Brown for 5 yards, and he went to Justice Hill, who had -1. And Pittsburgh just turned the ball. They didn't turn the ball over. They just punted it away.
Oh.
Roethlisberger 0 for 2. Benny Snell 5-yard rush, so he's almost over as well, and no one's caught one. So, we'll have the ball back just before we get going. Over under 42. How do we feel?
I'm going under just slightly, right? 26-13 is my line, despite what looks to be a pretty slow start on the Pittsburgh side. I'll stay under that 42.5 line.
I know that both of these teams have found a way to score, even though the defenses are really great. So I'm actually going to say over. And in spite of the fact that they're starting with 2 3 and outs. So,
yeah, as I said, I feel like Baltimore. I think Pittsburgh's going to blow this away by halftime. Even though the slow starts there, I still think I don't think Baltimore's going to do much up until that point. I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. I'm normally wrong. But I kind of like the idea of Pittsburgh taking them before halftime. They'll play catch up from there. I kind of lean it'll go closer to 42. I think it's right on the line. I think it might hit 44, 45 as it is.
I'm curious. Does Pittsburgh play down to this opponent? Or is this because this team is good and they're just injured? They won't play down to them. I'm curious as to
how does
this goes.
What does Gladys say every time that we talk about the Steelers?
They always play down to their.
They always play down to their opponent
every single time.
Every single time they're a lock.
I guess Jacksonville not quite. It looked a little scary at first, but yeah,
Denver's bad. That was bad against Denver. The Denver game, I'm pretty sure it was Denver anyway. That was pretty bad. They're going to do it. They'll get by and they'll still get that win. But my word,
I mean, they almost lost to the potential NFC East champions week 1. So
why do you have to bring that up? Why would you bring that up for, man? We were 2 Daniel Jones intercepts away from being 1-0 to start the year. That's just.
I thought I'd say potential. I thought I was pumping it up that they'd win the division. Who knows? But I didn't want to call it because I think I'm jinxing it.
Yeah,
that's the story of the Giants for the next 6 years. Two Daniel Jones interceptions away, right?
He's been pretty good the last month. Giants are undefeated. They've been undefeated for about a month now. They're doing all right.
I think if that's still the story 2 years from now, they're not gonna let it get to 6 years.
Yeah, fair point.
Depends if you listen to much of the Giants chatter. There's half the fan base thinks it's going to be over in 4 months' time anyway for Jones. It depends if you believe.
Gettleman's still there. You never know what'll happen.
He's the Gettleman guy, right? Gettleman loves him, so his fate is tied to Dave.
He cleared everyone I think it was everyone but Sterling Shepard out that Jerry Reese drafted. I think he's the last one left.
Whoa.
So he's turned that entire squad over. So, and I don't know. I think it's for the better. I think they're better. This isn't a Giants day this week, but if we're going down that route,
game started. We can talk whatever we want now.
Listen, some of these GMs are going to have to make those decisions. We spoke about Detroit during the week. Atlanta's going to be one of those teams. Jacksonville as well. A new GM's going to come in and look at the record for the past 3-4 years and go, this isn't good enough, and you guys can nick off. Why are you being paid that much? Out you get. So, if Gettleman's done that, and the Giants don't have to pay anyone on offense, I don't think they have to pay anyone, none of their offensive line.
He has Golden Tate if they wanted to, but
no, I think I think he could be gone at the end of the year. I don't see him sticking about, and everyone wants the name that floats around the Giants is Allen Robinson. So he's the name that, but I mean, there's probably 31 other teams. Yeah.
Everyone should want him.
Yeah, I mean, there's 31 other teams. I actually think if I was Allen Robinson, I'd want to go to a place where there's an actual quarterback.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there a more Allen Robinson landing spot than being paired up with Daniel Jones?
What happens if he goes to a good quarterback and he doesn't produce, though? What does that say about him?
Jones isn't that bad of a passer. He's not. I think he's a step up from Trubisky and Foles. I think he can hit
and Bortles.
Yeah, and Chad Henne and Blaine Gabbert. Chase Daniel. But it doesn't matter. I think if you watch any of these Giants games, Jones is hitting them on the outside frequently and easily. It's actually really nice. It's just some of the if Evan Ingram could catch, if Golden Tate, I know this is going to sound funny, but he's been pretty bad this year. So, he's been let down by a few of his receivers as well. I mean, we go on about that all day. So we're all leading Pittsburgh for the sweep here. We got Eric on the unders, Dan and Kyle on the overs, and we're going to be pretty much wrong. I've got a gut feeling Eric might be right here. I'm sorry.
All of us are going to be wrong somehow.
Who wants to plug their work? Who wants to get that out there?
Kyle, you go first.
All right, so I'm, as Dan mentioned, Mr. Full Press Coverage. Although, technically Mr. Full Press Coverage is Ian Glendon. But so I co-host the Full Press Fantasy Pod at FPC_Fantasy Pod. Also, I'm at Senra Says. Again, it's all on Twitter. Right for Going for Two. Right now, the Yahoo article weekly, and then in the off season, we'll see what that expands to. But Yahoo DFS, I know it's something that's not necessarily represented that much in terms of content. So I provide what I think are the best prices on the site, and hopefully people enjoy that. So you can check out. I usually put it out Saturday mornings, so get as much information injury wise, but still enough time all day Saturday before the main slate on Sunday. So check that out this week again on goingfor2.com.
Yeah, definitely check out Kyle's work. Yahoo is one of the platforms where there's an edge to be had, and he's doing some really good research there. So read the article, put a little money in your pocket each weekend. Again, my name is Eric Romoff. I also write for Going for Two, mainly on the prop and on the Thrive side, doing some free agency work as we wrap out the year. And as we were kind enough to mention, starting at the top, I'm also the co-founder of Pros with Joes for Charity. So like we mentioned, we give everyday players the chance to co-manage a team with their favorite fantasy pro in a league of experts. We've actually got 56 experts from every single platform you can imagine this year. And we are in the midst. We're actually about a week out from finishing our fundraise for this season. So if you want to get involved, if you want to donate, if you want to win a chance to play next year, or a ton of other prizes like premium subs, gear, one-on-one coaching, whatever it might be, you can go to our donor page. It's proswithjoes.rallyup.com/trophy. Every donation gets entered to win a whole heap of prizes. And I can say firsthand from working with these charities that every single dollar does go a long way. So we've got about a week left to continue to donate. You'll get entered to win some cool prizes. Again, proswithjoes.rallyup.com/trophy. You can find my work again at goingfor2.com, and my personal handles at FantasyNav if you want to see some of my prop bets and you want to see where you can find the inside track as you get used to Thrive, our newest partner.
I am, the B League says, funnily enough. I do write for Going for Two, the game plan for the week. I also write for the Back Row Fantasy Show, #Fantasy Impact, and host a Giants podcast, which is brutal. Let's go Colt McCoy at the Back Row Giants. And it's the Back Row Giants podcast. And you can also catch me and Kyle on your Monday Night War Room show for Going for Two Live and Going for Two. But between now and then, happy punting. Have a great day.
Cheers.